I have touched on this topic in the past, talking about Konami's return to Metal Gear and kind of what's happening and my opinions on it, just as someone who's not in the video game industry, but someone who has talked to developers, somebody who has played video games my whole life and enjoys this kind of stuff. Obviously, I'm not, the CEO of some company, but I find the situation interesting around Metal Gear because there is so many different groups of fans when it comes to this series, where there's like Konami property fans, right? Like just Metal Gear fans or Silent Hill fans or Castlevania fans. There's fans of specific creators. Like Hideo Kojima kind of almost has like a cult of personality around him, where I really respect the work that he's done, but I wouldn't say I'm like a Hideo Kojima fanboy. I would just say I really like his work, right? And then there are people who kind of fall somewhere in the middle. And that's where it becomes interesting to me when you look at Metal Gear Solid returning as a franchise and how people feel about it. There's a subset of fans that are very frustrated, who feel like, hey, your company in the past disrespected Kojima. That's not cool. I don't want to support you. And it's like, you can see their point of view. There's a group that are like, okay, well, Kojima said several times that Metal Gear was not his, it was Konami's, and that he loved it and worked on it, but he said like 50 times he wanted to be done with it. So why not let someone else do it? And it's like, I get that point too. That's why I want to talk about that in the future as well, in terms of like, should Metal Gear be made by someone else? But in general, it is going to be. Like, we know that it's coming back, and I find the reasoning behind it very interesting. Now, this originally came out quite a while ago. It was near the end of last year in November, and there was an interview actually with Noriaki Okamura, who is pretty much a series producer here, who has been around for a very, very long time, and he's been involved in a lot of projects at Konami, and he's somebody who had worked before with Hideo Kojima. Now, what's interesting about this is he talked about the reason that Konami wanted Metal Gear to come back, and the reason essentially was that they were kind of worried that people were forgetting what it even was. Now, you might look at that and you might say, well, what are you talking about? MGS 5 was in 2015, it was on the PS4, Xbox One generation, PC. How would people forget? The idea was essentially that younger gamers, like the newer generation of gamers, they're not as familiar with Metal Gear. So this is something I want to talk about for a few minutes and kind of give a take on, I guess, and get your take on. I want to know what you think about it. I do have a question of the day for you, though, which is there a series that you feel has been forgotten by fans, by the company that made it, whatever, that you'd like to see come back? I think for me, I made a video about this in the past, and it's probably Star Fox. Like, that, to me, is one of the biggest ones. Or on my other channel, JayRPG, I talked a little bit about the Mega Man Legends series that kind of died after a company turmoil at Capcom, never came back. So there are things for me I wish would come back. Metal Gear, though, is a very interesting case where you have this animosity in the fandom, though. And I do understand a lot of it. There's a lot of things that I think we will never get full information on. I see people point out the bad work conditions that were alleged at Konami and reported by people, and what happened with Kojima kind of being pushed away from the Game Awards, and I totally see their point on why they are upset. At the same time, I also see people more and more nowadays bring up the fact that MGS 5 went way over budget. There was already this problem at Konami of like not having faith in console games because the market was moving mobile at the time. And I'm kind of like, from a business standpoint, you kind of understand why they were hesitant, even if I think they went about it the wrong way. But when Okamura was talking about this, I thought it was kind of fascinating to hear his take, because he is a veteran of the games industry, saying one of the things that really sparked us to do the remake, talking about MGS 3, so Delta, in general, is because we realized that a lot of the newer, younger generation of gamers aren't familiar with the Metal Gear series anymore. He went on to talk about it a little bit more, saying it was basically our mission, our duty, to kind of continue making sure that the series lives on for future generations. After all, we leave behind so much more than just DNA, as Solid Snake would say. But again, who is Solid Snake? Kind of the idea that essentially new players, new gamers, they're not really going to know these characters. And you might look at it and you might say, well, how is that possible? Well, one way it's possible is that, unfortunately, there is this push, especially with the younger generation, that old games are not worth playing. Now, for me, if I want to be completely honest with you, is there a cutoff at which I enjoy games a little less, personally? I guess kind of. Like for me, things started getting interesting around the SNES era. You know, that's kind of for me where gaming picks up. There are certain games before that I enjoy, but to me, the technology was kind of rudimentary before that, right? Like it was still really, really developing and finding its footing. But that said, that to a lot of people is crazy. Like there's a lot of people who will not touch anything before like the 360 generation, the PS3. And even then to them, that's old. That sucks, but there is a whole group of younger gamers who are kind of being conditioned to be a consumer. Buy new thing, buy new thing, buy new thing, move on. I think unfortunately that's kind of the situation that a lot of franchises find themselves in. We get tired of constant reboots or constant remakes or remasters or things like that. For me, I feel like I want these things to be made as long as they are respectful and good. I think that's where it becomes a weird fight, though, with the fandom, because there's a lot of people that are so upset about the Kojima situation that no matter what comes out, they're going to be upset about it. And they have that right, you know, like you have the right to support or not support anything you want. For me, I want games to be good. You know, I've talked about it before. I feel like there are other stories even for these characters that could be told. And when I look back at some of the things Kojima said, it's not that I don't agree with him or don't like him, but, you know, all the way back to basically Metal Gear Solid 2, I think even 1 before that, you know, he was kind of talking about being done. And when you're looking at something like Metal Gear Solid 2, he had an interview with IGN where he said, I want to do something totally different, but I've been saying this forever. I said that right after MGS 1 as well, going on to saying, I really think it is time for me to hand the director role over to someone else. I might do the initial planning for the next game, but not much more than that. And there were games that he wasn't as involved in or wasn't really involved in when it came to some of the offshoots. But overall, when it came to the title, like the mainline titles, he was always very involved. And there's such an interesting conversation to be had there that I'd like to have in a future video, again, about could someone other than Kojima make a game? Like if a talented writer or a talented outliner or whatever comes into Konami and Konami owns this series, this property, should that writer be punished? Should they be held back from telling a compelling story in that universe? I feel like that's an interesting discussion. But on the other hand, are they only writing a story in that universe to make money and it doesn't actually add anything? It's like that's the other side of the coin. So again, that's something I want to talk about in the future that I would love to hear your thoughts on, even in the comments down here. It could inform my discussion in the future of that. But when we're looking at this, I think it is important to preserve the history. You know, that's where something like the Master Collection to me was a bummer at launch in a way, but also a boon, also a blessing in a way, where it was like, I understood that those ports had some problems that the PS3 versions didn't have, right? You know, the ports on that. They were basically ports of a remaster. And to me, it was something where it was like, this is kind of frustrating. Like, why does it have these problems? But at least it's getting people playing Metal Gear. It's a competent enough release that you can finish. You know, people are talking about Metal Gear again. People are trying it for the first time. I saw so many people who said, you know, basically that they weren't going to try it. And then that came out and that got them to try it. I might not agree with those people. You might not agree with those people. You might say, why don't you break out a PS2 or why don't you emulate? But they're not going to. Like, even if we think that, they are not going to do that. So it's like then you have all of these future gamers who are just not going to ever care or experience that art of Metal Gear. And again, I know some people don't care because they're like, oh, well, the art is out there. I got to experience it. It's their loss. But for me, I want there to be a history there. Like, I want people years from now to be enjoying the stories of Naked Snake, Solid Snake, Venom Snake, you know, Big Boss. I want them to be diving into these side stories like the character development of Otacon. I want them to be seeing what happened with Raiden. I want them to be enjoying those things and to have a connection with those characters the same way that some of us did growing up, or maybe we even did later in life. To me, that matters, and like that's a big part of what art is. To me, art isn't something you just put out, it becomes outdated and you move on, which is why it frustrates me when people won't try older games a lot of times. Now, that said, it can frustrate me all at once, and they still won't try it. So something like Master Collection to me at launch, I was glad it existed. I talked about it as like a net positive, but I wished it was better. And now over time, I released a video about this a month or two ago. I think it's gotten a lot better. Now, did it need to get better? Like, should it have just been good at launch? Yeah. And like, for me, if Konami screws that up again, if they do a Master Collection Volume 2 and it's not good at launch, I don't mean perfect, nothing is perfect, but I mean very competent, very good. Or if they release Delta and it's got a lot of problems, at that point to me, it's kind of like, why did we bother? You know, why did we bother bringing this back? At that point, you're tarnishing history. You're not preserving history. You're not, adding to history. You're not making history accessible. You are tarnishing it. You are making its name or its reputation worse. You're basically being like a lot of modern Spider-Man comics where it's like, you're just ruining the character instead of adding anything of value. That to me is what concerns me when you look at this series. Like, I've been going back and playing a lot of MGS 5 recently, just in my free time, and the world blows me away. Like, the details to characters, all the interesting little bits of lore you can find, the cassette tapes that fill you in on the iDroid with more information and story, some of the cutscenes, things like this, the gameplay mechanics, like the idea of riding a horse and being able to disguise yourself in the distance, like your silhouette, by ducking down on the side of the horse, or the ability to use the cardboard box to slide down dunes or hills like a playground. Like, these things to me they've been so impressive revisiting. And I want experiences like that. I want experiences like when people fought the boss, the End, the sniper in MGS 3, and they found out that if they basically left the game for 2 weeks, the guy would die of old age because he was really old. Or the fact that you could snipe him when he's being wheeled out of the plane, as like a secret way to beat the boss before even fighting him. I want that level of game. I want that level of detail. And for me, what worries me about this is Kojima was good at that level of detail. So if you're bringing this back, you have to do a good job. You have to be able to maintain quality. And Master Collection was not a great first impression at launch. But then I think it's gotten a lot better. Silent Hill 2 remake came out. I think it was a high quality game that I think they did a good job with. So I understand the concerns, and we'll talk about this more in the future. I do want your thoughts on it, but I find the idea of preserving that history interesting as long as it doesn't come at the cost of tarnishing it. And that is where I worry about things. So I'd be interested to hear your thoughts down below. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like, subscribe. Those things help me out a lot. By the way, those of you who have been using the Fortnite code, I know it's a little bit of a different conversation. Thank you very much. That's helped me a lot. It's been a rough 6 months on YouTube. So DJAY123, every time you guys use that helps my channel quite a bit, actually. Really offsets costs for things that I have to do. So thank you. I want to say a real quick thank you to my channel members. I'll put a list of you guys right here. The GOATs. It's like the video of the guy screaming, "That's why they're the GOAT." It's you guys. I appreciate it. We have other channels in the description down below, like JayRPG, focused on RPG games. We got Magical Jill. We focus more on anime content, manga, stuff like that. We've got Degenerate Plays, where we play through games, podcast style, so all kinds of stuff there. Then, of course, as well, we do have our own store, CosmoBunny.shop. You can use code DJAY123 for 10% off your first purchase. Transformative coasters, keychains, trays, and more made from recycled paper. We don't print images. We take comics, manga, magazines, all this stuff, and what we do is we take damaged ones that are unable to be sold or moved by local stores. We make something out of them, and then we recycle the rest. We keep it out of landfills, make something new and transformative for your home, and hopefully you enjoy it. I hope you all have a fantastic day, and as always, everyone, stay shui.